Hello, fourth grade geologists. So last time we were together, we talked about how grinding the rocks turned them into sand and made lots and lots of sand. So in real life, after rocks are tumbling along in the bottom of a river and little pieces are breaking off into sand, do you think that the sand just falls to the bottom of the river and stays there? Or like this? Or do you think it actually moves somewhere else? What do you think happens when the rocks tumble and little sand pieces break off? Where do they go? So we're going to try to find that out today. We're going to pretend this is our river. We've got our rocks. They're grinding, they're tumbling as the water whooshes past them. And as they bump into each other, they click, click, break off into little pieces of sand come off. This is all the sand I made before. So, they've been doing a lot, maybe like a couple hundred years of clanking into each other. And they're getting smoother and rounder. And the little pieces of sand are falling off. Where is that sand going to go? Let's see if our stream actually has some water in it, what will happen. So you can actually see the sand, the rock is traveling in the water.
And this is what happens in a real river. So if you can picture a river that you've ever seen before, obviously there's a lot of water going really quickly down the river, but what you can't see, what you might not have noticed, is that in the water is traveling a ton of little pieces of sand, little pieces of dirt. All these sediments are being carried along for a wild ride in that river.
So that's what happens in real life. We have these big rocks, little tiny pieces getting broken off, and those little rock pieces, those little pieces of sand, get whooshed down and travel to a new place.
But what new place? Where is this sand going? When will it stop traveling and settle down in a new spot? So here's a river, a real river in Maine that many of you have probably seen without realizing it. This is the river that leads to Popham Beach. So think about what we just saw in the river we made. What was traveling in that river water? Lots and lots of sand and sediment. So do you see in this picture of the river, do you see some areas where it looks like sand is traveling and maybe even has stopped and formed a little mini beach? The sand travels and travels until the water slows down. And when the water slows down, the sand falls to the bottom. And sometimes it piles up, if there's a lot of it, into a beach.
Basically, rocks change, and pieces of rock get broken off. They travel to a new place, and then they land in a new spot. For example, a beach, like Popham Beach, didn't always exist right there. Those pieces of sand had to travel a long way in order to get to Popham Beach. So that process of rocks breaking off a little piece and having it travel to a new place, it actually is happening around you all the time without you even noticing. That process is why we have smooth rocks in the bottom of rivers. That process is why we have sand with all those little tiny pieces getting broken off. So it's happening around you all the time. And what we're going to learn today is some science words to describe that process. So this is a kind of helpful way that I've come up with to remember the different parts of that process. So everyone take your hands and make a rock. And we're going to imagine now that a little piece gets broken off that rock. So the first part we're going to talk about is break it. So everyone take your rock, break it. And then that piece travels to a new place. We're going to call this take it. So try that. Take it. And then when it gets to its new spot, drop it. Drop it. So break it. Copy me again. Break it. Take it. Drop it. Break it. Take it. Drop it. So that process of break it, take it, drop it is happening over and over and over nonstop all day, every day to all the rocks that you can think of. Every rock in the bottom of a stream, every rock that's getting tumbled on by the crashing waves at the ocean.
every rock that's at the bottom of a waterfall, that's being pounded all day long by that super powerful water, and every rock that's in a fast moving river like this, where the powerful water is charging by, rushing by, and scraping off little tiny, tiny pieces of rock, little pieces of sand as the water goes by.
This break it, take it, drop it has some fancy science words to go along with it. So the real science words for when you break a rock, when the rock gets broken: weathering. When the rock gets carried away to a new place, erosion. And when it gets dropped in a new spot, deposition. Kind of hard to remember, but still important words. So weathering, erosion, deposition. Or, if you need a reminder, break it, take it, drop it. So let's look at a few examples, and I'm going to show you a picture and try to figure out if that is an example of break it, take it, or drop it.
So look at this picture. What do you see happening? Do you think that's break it, take it, or drop it? And this should be a pretty easy one to start with because we've talked a little bit about crashing waves already. That's a break it for sure. The crashing waves are pounding on the rocks and breaking off little pieces. But also, if you were thinking it's a take it, I could understand that because the water is definitely going to take away whatever pieces it breaks off. So that could be a break it or a take it.
I love this picture. This is a sea arch in Mexico. So you think this is break it, take it, or drop it? Yeah, this is break it. Because if you can imagine, actually, it didn't always used to be a sea arch. It used to just be rock. And then, after years and years of that ocean, those waves constantly crashing against the rocks, some of them got worn away and broken off and turned into sand. So just like when you were grinding rocks and some rocks were harder and some were softer, same thing here. So the rock that's softer got worn away quicker and now it's gone. And the rock that's left behind is the really, really hard rock.
And make your vote for this picture. What do you see happening here?
So sometimes kids vote for break it. And I could see that because you're thinking those smooth, round rocks are getting all the rough edges broken off and now they're smooth. And that definitely happened in the past, over time, over a long time. But right now, the river isn't looking super powerful. I'd say that right now it's mostly just take it. So the sand is getting carried to a new spot. So here's a very dramatic example. What do you see happening here? Break it, take it, or drop it? So really, we can see all three things happening. We see obviously that the rocks got broken off, they tumbled down the cliff, and they landed in their new spot down at the bottom on the beach. So that's break it, take it, and drop it. One big difference from the waterfalls and the rivers that we've been looking at, that kind of weathering and erosion is really slow, and it takes hundreds, if not thousands of years to change the rock. But in this case, in this picture, this was sudden. This probably took a day, maybe 2 days, to have a huge, huge change. So that's a really fast change. Weathering and erosion can be slow, or in this case, they can be fast. Also, were you a good detective in looking at this picture? Can you see what caused this to happen? Hopefully you could tell that it was the powerful ocean waves during a big storm. And how about this picture? Take your vote. Break it, take it, or drop it. That's right, this is a break it. It's a weathering. Now, this rock did not get broken by water. So far we've looked at crashing ocean waves, we've looked at a waterfall, we've looked at a river. This rock did not get broken by water, technically speaking. Does anyone have an idea what did break this rock? So it was actually ice that did this. What happens is water gets in a little crack, and then when it freezes, ice expands. Ice gets a little bit bigger. So as it got bigger, it kind of
forced apart those two pieces of the rock. It cracked it right open. And you might have actually seen this happen in the road before or in your driveway. There's a tiny little crack and water gets in winter, turns to ice, and can cause major cracks and breaks in the road. This is a picture taken from way up high in the sky looking down at the ocean, and the tan color is dirt. You can see that there's a lot of dirt washing down this river into the ocean. What's that? Break it, take it, or drop it? That's right, it's take it, erosion. So it's getting carried. The sand and dirt is getting carried to a new spot. And what's the next step? When the sand gets to the new spot, it piles up. And look, these are new beaches that were formed. And the surfers who live here were super excited because no one had really quite known what would happen. This is in Washington State, and what happened is there were 2 dams on this river, and the dams had been blocking sand and dirt and all other things from washing down the river for about 100 years. So when they took out these 2 dams, there was a massive, huge rush of water plus 100 years worth of silt and dirt and sand that had built up behind the dam, and it all washed out the river and formed these new beaches. So that's take it and drop it. So this picture is an example of, make your guess, break it, weathering. This rock is being broken apart into pieces by tree roots. Plant roots, if they get in a crack, just like when the ice gets in a crack, they can break apart rock. And this is our final picture. So take your guess, break it, take it, or drop it. This picture is pretty confusing. It's a tricky one. You can almost see all 3 things happening at the same time. So if you voted for break it, the weathering, because you said the waves are pounding on the beach and breaking them into even smaller and smaller pieces of sand, you're right. And if you said take it for erosion, because you said, well, I can see the water, the waves carrying sand into a new place and dropping it, that's true too. You can see the carrying to a new place. That's the take it. And you can see that all that sand got dropped there, the deposition. So really, this is a great picture where you can see all 3 things happening at once. And before we finish, I want to show you this video. I took this video at Popham Beach last weekend. I was standing along the beach, and the river was coming in, rushing past, breaking off chunks of the beach and washing them away. This was break it and take it. So here's a picture of that exact same thing happening on land. You can see the huge pieces of land that broke off, that fell right into the river. So that's some serious break it. And here you can see the exact same thing happening again. So remember, just like I saw at Popham Beach, it's the same thing, but instead of a big piece of sand or a chunk of land breaking off, this time there's a road on top of it. So that's a big problem. So next time we get together, we're actually going to do a scavenger hunt and see if we can find these things happening in real life near where we live.